Okay, welcome back everyone. Sorry this video is a lot later than I was expecting. I was trying to get it done in a reasonable time, but the thing is, two of these shows came out in 2023, but their finales slash last couple episodes that would tie up the story did not release until the beginning of 2024. And so because of that, and I would say these two shows are fairly relevant to the channel, that is why I did hold off this video and wait for it. And so before that, I'll just kind of go over the rules. And so this is my ranking of every movie and TV show that came out in 2023 that I ended up seeing. And so if you see a project that came out this year that is not on the list, it's simply because I did not watch it. Some of you will probably notice that there's not a lot of Disney products on here, and that's because a lot of the shows and movies did not look good, and knowing how I feel about their previous movies, I knew I wasn't going to enjoy them, so why waste my time? I think one of the most important things that I've learned while not doing this channel for that hiatus of 9 months was because there's more important things in life than wasting 2.5 hours on a movie that's not very good. And so in a lot of the cases, my preconceived notions of it were confirmed by the general public, which when the general public feels that a movie is not good, that kind of speaks for itself. And so with that, welcome back to ranking all the stuff for the year. And so this is the third year in a row, so I'll just briefly go over the rules again. F tier, that's your trash. There's not really any redeeming qualities to that movie or show. If there are, maybe it's so minuscule that it doesn't really make a difference. D, slightly better good elements, or maybe those good elements in an otherwise F tier movie are a little more prominent, but other than that, still not a good movie. I would say those are probably your very forgettable movies and shows that you cannot remember for the life of you. Whereas at least F tier, you're probably going to remember, but it's probably not going to make you feel positively. C tier, those are your average, just mid movies. Let's face it, most movies and shows are just fine. They're competently made in some areas, and then they're incompetently made in other areas. And so that's where I feel a lot of stuff ends up going in C tier. That's your pretty, it was fine. Wouldn't watch it again anytime soon, if ever, but it was fine. I didn't hate it. B tier, that's like your first tier of like actually good movies. Being good with mostly good elements, but probably has a couple things just holding it back from being great, which is where we get A tier. Those are your great movies that are mostly good with maybe a couple minor stuff that holds it back from being S tier. And S tier are those, there's no such thing as 10 out of 10 movies, but S tier are the movies that come the closest to that. And those are the movies that, for whatever reason, stuck out to me personally. Whether there could be a lot of different reasons, but S tier, I think we all know that's the cream of the crop, no matter who's ranking a tier list. And so with that, let's begin with one of the shows that held off the production of this series, and that is Monarch: Legacy of Monsters. And with that, definitely a very mixed show. I know a lot of Monsterverse fans felt pretty strongly one way or another about this show, and I gotta say I'm kind of in the middle. There's definitely elements of it that I like. I think that it does a really good job of showing the background of Monarch in the early days, showing the founding members of it, and I think that is definitely the strongest part. The characters in that you actually care about and relate with, and you want to see them succeed. It's also cool to see them make these little discoveries in relation to the Titans and the world that they live in. And so that's a really excellent element. Another element is the monster action. When there is monster action, it's pretty solid. I'll say Godzilla was in it a lot more than I thought he was gonna be. Still probably not as much as I think a lot of people wanted, and even the trailer advertised it like he was gonna be in it more. I was not expecting that, but I can say I was pleasantly surprised on that, and the action was a lot of fun. Drawbacks, the modern day characters, such a drag, such a bore. Like, you do not care about them. It is way too soap opera drama related. It doesn't have to do with them trying to find stuff relating to Monarch. It's more of them trying to find stuff about their dad. And the characters are not very likable. The acting for them is pretty missed. They're all supposed to be young adults, but if we're being honest, the acting is pretty hit or miss. Sometimes they do a really solid job. Other times you just think, maybe you guys should have done another take on that. And so it's very mixed on that part. The only, I'd say, consistently good actors are the more seasoned actors like Kurt Russell or the actors in the flashback scenes. But I mean, I could not tell you any of the main characters' names in the modern day. They just make the dumbest decisions that when they face the consequences of a dumb decision 5 minutes earlier, and they'll make that exact same decision again. And just be like, wait, what? Why did we get caught? Or why are the police chasing us? It's just ridiculous on how inconsistently dumb, not even inconsistently, they're pretty consistent how stupid they are. And to me, that's probably one of the most frustrating parts of it. And the fact that the majority of the time is spent more with the modern cast than the past cast. And so with that, I would probably put Monarch Legacy of Monsters in C tier. Again, not great, not terrible. I think there is enough good in the show to at least not say it's bad, but I really wouldn't say it was good either. And so with that, I think we'll go to the second show that held back this video from being released earlier. And that would be Reacher Season 2, which, if you know me, I love the first season of Reacher. I saw it, I believe it was the Critical Drinker, who I occasionally watch. He did a video on that first season, and it really piqued my interest, and I watched it, and I gotta say, it was one of the most fun times I've had in a show. And I would say Season 2 definitely delivers on that. I think it's not necessarily as fun, but I think the emotions of it hit a lot harder in this season than the previous season. And, you know, for me, I think I'm fine with that compromise. That's a compromise where, unlike Legacy of Monsters, where the emotional moments don't really hit and they feel very forced, but you just don't care about the character, so ultimately they're empty, Reacher, you care about all the characters, at least the characters you're supposed to care about. And so with that, I would say Reacher Season 2 would probably be high A, low S tier. For now, I think I'll put it in high and low S tier for now. I'll just put it out the front just because there's nothing else up there. But, you know, as other things come and I'll kind of see where that set bar is, we'll see where Reacher Season 2 sits. But for now, it's an excellent show that I highly recommend checking out both seasons. That's just a fun action show with a lot of heart to it. And I think that's something that's lacking a lot of days now. And so next we got, let's do Velma. Velma was, funny enough, the first major project that I watched this year for this list. And I even did its own separate video for it, and you can check it out if you want. I knew it was not going to be good, but Velma is probably one of the worst shows I've ever seen. I would say probably worse than She-Hulk, which is a pretty bold claim because She-Hulk was honestly terrible, and the fact that the cast and the makers of it don't understand why they're not getting a Season 2, probably for the best that it's not getting a Season 2. But Velma, yeah, it's F tier. I mean, I think everyone knows why. Velma is one of the most unlikable protagonists ever that I've seen in a show, which is pretty, that's a tough list to beat. You got a lot of competition in that regard. And the only thing that I would say is the animation. Everything else is terrible. It just seems, it's so mean-spirited, but not in a fun way. You can do mean-spirited shows and have it still work. Velma is not one of those shows. It's just, it seems like it hates the things that it's based off, but it's also definitely not confident enough that it could be its own successful thing, that it has to piggyback on the success of Scooby-Doo, which Scooby-Doo is like one of the most wholesome, beloved franchises ever. There's not a lot of people that are like, I hate Scooby-Doo, blah. I think all the people that hate Scooby-Doo were probably involved in this show, and so, yeah, Velma's F tier. It's easily the worst thing that came out this year, hands down, no contest. Next, let's do Elemental. Elemental, pure C tier movie. Animation's pretty. It was a lot better than the trailers made it. That's it. You like the characters enough. It's a cute little movie that is fine for kids, but other than that, there's not a whole lot to it. Will say it's probably better than Monarch Legacy of Monsters. That's not a particularly good show, and so with that, I'll move that one. Put Elemental in front of it. Next, Prehistoric Planet Season 2. This was one that I wasn't sure that I was actually going to be able to see this year because I did not have an Apple TV Plus prescription, or so I thought. Turns out I actually did, and so I actually was able to watch it, and that's one of the reasons why I was able to watch Monarch Legacy of Monsters. Prehistoric Planet Season 2, wow, had a brain aneurysm right there. It's, I would say, just as good as Season 1. I think it's very evident that Season 2 is a lot of leftover segments from Season 1 that probably got scrapped, because a lot of it is still focusing on a lot of the same dinosaurs that we saw in Season 1, which I'm fine with because I still feel like they're doing other interesting ideas with it, that you're not just seeing, oh, it's just T-Rex hunting again, oh, it's just Triceratops fighting again. It's a lot of different things from what we saw in the first season. I'll say a lot of it, I'd say, was probably more in line with what you would see from a traditional dinosaur documentary. So if I were comparing the two, contrary to what I probably just said, I would say Season 1 is better than Season 2. Just because I think, it did it first, and I think it had that benefit of the doubt of any of the similar segments with the same dinosaurs. Season 1 came out first, so that's what we were exposed to first. But I would still say Season 2 is S tier. Highly enjoyable, awesome visual effects, great soundtrack, great music. I gotta say that I'd still definitely prefer the Walking with Beasts soundtrack, but the Prehistoric Planet soundtrack is definitely growing on me, and so with that, S tier, I will say it will go in front of Reacher Season 2. But if you haven't, you can also just check out all the segments online on YouTube, which is one of the nice things about the internet is people are going to upload the individual segments, and so if you don't have Apple TV Plus, you could check it out there. Not that I would ever encourage something like that on this channel, he said smugly. Next, Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. It's a fun movie. I think it's not necessarily the movie for me. I definitely had fun. I laughed at a couple of the jokes. I think there was a lot of effort and care that went into this movie. I've dabbled in Dungeons and Dragons, but I think if I played it more, I think I would probably like it more. I think from what I've talked to people who have played it, I think a lot of them would probably put an A tier. It's not like the greatest movie ever, but it's like a fun, solid movie that I would definitely recommend before checking out Elemental or Monarch, or definitely Velma, but I hope that goes without being said. And so I'd say B tier. That it's a fun movie. It's just fun. I feel like it's one of those movies that there's not a whole lot to say to it. Let's knock out some controversial movies, because I feel like this year was just full of controversy in terms of movies, which Sound of Freedom, which is a movie based on a true story involving human trafficking, specifically children trafficking. And from what I saw, it's one of those movies that had political drama around it. There's actually several of them in here. But I just avoided it because I didn't want to deal with it, and I'm sick of all of it. As someone who before posting and stuff, I used to be a lot more involved and interested in all that. It's a headache. And so Sound of Freedom, I was aware of the drama and controversy. And I gotta be honest, I don't really see why. I don't see why people wouldn't like it, which is from what my understanding is that mainstream media did not like it. But I shouldn't be surprised considering Cuties has a certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think that's something that should never be forgotten. And so Sound of Freedom, I think it's one of those movies that you kind of have to be in the right mood for. It's not just something that you're like, oh, let's pop in the movie about human trafficking and eat some popcorn and have a good old time. It's a pretty heavy movie. I think if you are going to watch it, you have to be prepared for that and know that going in. There's not really anything like objectively wrong with it that at least comes to my head. There's nothing that I thought like, oh, well, the acting's bad or any of this. It just didn't have that element that for me, that gives it S tier, if that makes sense. It's like that special ingredient, think of it from like Kung Fu Panda, before the reveal. And so Sound of Freedom, A tier. It's a really good movie that I do recommend checking out, but just know ahead of the sensitive material that goes on in it. Next, let's do Blue Eye Samurai. This is one that you might have heard a little about. It's definitely one that has popped up pretty recently within the last couple weeks, maybe last month. And I saw a lot of videos doing it. The video that made me want to watch it, I don't remember what it was called. If I find it, I will put a picture of it up, and I'll put a link up in the little top corner. But it said it was the next Arcane, and to me that's an instant, ooh, another animated show that's just as good as Arcane. Sign me up. And so I watched it, and Blue Eyed Samurai, excellent show, easily S tier. Gotta say it's ahead of the pack of season 2 and both season 2s of each show. But with that, it's an excellent show. All the characters are incredibly well thought out. You understand why each character is the way that they are. I really like the themes of the show, the atmosphere, the animation. Oh my gosh, the animation is so beautiful. But I'd say the themes and just the atmosphere for me were the biggest points. The themes of revenge, and a lot of it having to do with sex, which, call me senile and decrepit and old, but I don't really care for a whole lot of sex in shows. I think a lot of it felt forced, and it doesn't really contribute a lot in a way that couldn't just be heavily implied from it. I'll say this, Blue Eyed Samurai, while having a lot of it, to the point where I was talking with one of my friends who doesn't necessarily have as big of a problem with it as me, he said for him it was a lot, and so I think with that, makes me feel a little validated. My buddy, shout out to you, Nathan. We got relatively similar tastes in shows and movies, but Blue Eyed Samurai, it's I feel like the way it handles, there's a lot of different sub topics of sex that it relates to, including assault, just individual women's rights, all of that. The way it does it is more artistic, and I mean that figuratively, in that it does handle it with respect most of the time, but it also, even just the way that they talk about it in the show, it's more related to an art, not necessarily more of a sophisticated way. Like prostitution, that's a big theme of this show. And so with that, I'd have to say it handles it relatively tastefully. It's just a lot, and something like that, even if it is handled tastefully, it still can be a very filling, realize I'm making a whole bunch of innuendos right now, but it handles it, I'm trying to just repeating myself, I'm rambling, but just to finish up, I think it does it well. It's just one of those themes that, at least for me, it's a lot, but that doesn't take away from the absolute quality of the show. We are getting the season 2. I imagine it'll probably be coming out in 2025, but who knows, maybe it's coming out sooner this year. I didn't see anything about it, but it would be a very pleasant surprise, and I hope season 2 is just as good as season 1, if not better. But definitely another animated Netflix show that you can count on. Speaking of Netflix animated shows, let's do Leo. Leo was another movie that I wouldn't say was a controversial movie, but definitely grabbed a lot of attention. And I think because it was basically just a better Disney film, it's a better Disney film than any film Disney has put out. And so because of that, a lot of people were praising it and were highly recommending it and everything. And yeah, it's a really good movie. It's certainly better than anything Disney has put out. Is it as great as a lot of people say? I mean, that's the name of the game with YouTube. You always gotta hype up something, whether how good it is or how bad it is, because, you know, you gotta get them clicks and stuff. I'm guilty of that myself, too. Leo, I think, is a good movie. I would probably put it in B tier, except there are a couple things that I can think of that hold it back for me. And one is, it's a musical, and the music is not very good. Like, it doesn't fully commit to the musical. And I think if it did and had, like, actual good songs and singers, then it would be good. Another thing, the liar reveal. I'm just not a fan of that story arc. It's always so cliche and so overdone. It's just the same thing over and over again. But it's not done terrible. And I feel like it makes a little more sense in here than maybe some other shows, given with what happens. But it's a feel-good movie, and I think you really like a lot of the lessons. And there's some genuinely like hard-hitting emotional moments in Leo, the Adam Sandler Netflix movie of all things. But I would highly recommend checking out Leo. It's an incredibly good movie that I think both kids and parents can enjoy. Chicken Run 2. This one's a little relevant. I have something in the works right now that will probably be announced sometime in the future, near soon. I mean, we'll see about that. This is like big project number 5 that I have in the works that I haven't delivered on, but you know, maybe that's the focus of this year. Big project here. But Chicken Run Season 2. Not Season 2. Dawn of the Nugget Movie 2. It's fine. I don't know. I liked it more than a lot of the other movies, but nowhere near as good as the first 2. And, you know, not that you can't have every movie be an absolute banger, but it's just not. It was okay. I feel like there's certain things that it just could have done better. There's just a lot of callbacks to the first movie that's like, hey, you remember this? You remember that? You're like, yeah, I remember it. It was better done in the first movie, but it's okay. It's fine. It's got a couple decent laughs. The stop motion is incredible, and you know, I would still recommend it before a lot of other things. And it's fine. It's one of those movies that I could just ramble on about how okay it is, but we'll be sweet and short and just say it's fun. It's fine. It's nothing special. Moving on to the next one. The Creator. This was one of those movies that I saw the trailers for it and just the absolute raves it was getting, and I thought, okay, like, I don't necessarily know what it's about. I know it has to do something with AI, but I'll check it out. And AI is a very thought-provoking film that has some really cool ideas, and I think for the most part it does the execution of those ideas pretty well. But I will say some of it does drag a little, and I can't say that I was super invested in all of the characters. But I think it's a competently made film. The cinematography is excellent, and I think the ideas in the world is just so excellently made and executed on that. The characters you do not hate, they're just a bit bland in some parts. And that's not necessarily they're poorly written. They have proper motivations. You understand why people are doing things. It was just one of those things where I think part of it just doesn't click with me. But I would still say A tier, which I guess the way I talked about it made it sound like it was this terrible movie or it's barely okay. When that's the creator, a very solid sci-fi movie. Just there's probably other sci-fi movies with similar tones that I would pick over this, as a personal preference. Once Upon a Studio. This is one of the few Disney projects that I actually did watch, and Once Upon a Studio seems so weird because in an era where Disney has never felt more corporate and just money hungry and greedy, the fact that Once Upon a Studio, which is probably like the pinnacle of like wholesome Disney, like back in the old day of just classic stories, lovable characters, Once Upon a Studio kind of capitalizes on it, and it still technically does all the same stuff that I don't like, relying on nostalgia, but it does it in a way that makes sense. I mean, this is a 100-year celebration of Disney for what this short was, including Wish, which I did not see, but from what I am hearing and seeing, I'm not missing a whole lot. But Once Upon a Studio, it feels like an anomaly. It's like you have that one person, or maybe take a comedian, that just keeps telling bomb after bomb jokes, and they're just terrible jokes and no one's laughing. And then all of a sudden, they just, in the middle of the set, they just drop one of the most hilarious jokes ever. And you're like, oh wow, and you're like, so you are but it makes you wonder, while you enjoy that joke, you think, so you are capable of telling good jokes, why aren't you telling good jokes this whole time, or at least not terrible jokes? And that's what Once Upon a Studio feels like. As an actual short, it's very good. It's fun, it's very lighthearted. I had a great time watching it. Solid A tier. You know what? I dare say I would put it over Sound of Freedom and The Creator. But it's so puzzling that it just proves that Disney is capable of making good movies and shows, but I don't know, for whatever reason, they're just fucking around, I guess. They're not doing it. But, you know, if they want to keep making poor financial decisions by making not good movies and shows, you know, that's them. That's on them. They can deal with it. I don't care. Not that I'm rooting for them either way. Just want them to actually just change and make good movies, but yeah, definitely a weird one, Once Upon a Studio. It almost makes all the other projects in comparison that much worse. Which, let's go on. I'm probably one of the other few Disney movies that I did end up or related properties I watched, and that was Mandalorian season 3, which was terrible. It's not good. It was so much filler, and of course, just like the previous two, everything it builds up. You could watch the first episode and you could watch the very end of the last episode, and you wouldn't think that anything happened. And it doesn't make it any better the fact that Baby Yoda had an arc in Book of Boba Fett that just did not happen. That happened all in that show after season 2, which made it seem like Baby Yoda was leaving the Mandalorian, which, yeah, I know it's Grogu, but I don't care enough to say it. Just does not care. Just completely, if you did not watch Book of Boba Fett and you just come back season 3, you'd think, wait, why is Baby Yoda back with the Mandalorian? Didn't he like leave with Luke Skywalker? And you know, it's not like they address it in the show. They just assume you consume all product, which a lot of people are not starting to do, and I think it's to the detriment. Is it as bad as Velma? No. Nothing is as bad as Velma. Yeah, Velma is a whole special category of terrible. Velma could honestly be its own thing. Are there any positive effects to The Mandalorian? I like Kate, what's her name, as Bo-Katan. And she seems like a pretty chill person outside of Star Wars. That's kind of it. It's not good, folks. Like, the problem is like, at the very least, I think this is the show that made a lot of people realize kind of what Disney Star Wars is doing, and I think it turned a lot of people off, which I can at least be thankful for that. But yeah, Mandalorian season 3 F tier, which kind of surprises me, but actually thinking about it, I'm like, no, that was terrible. I didn't enjoy any part of it. And so yeah, that's a F tier. I was, when I first watched it, I thought D tier. But honestly, thinking about it, screw it. I did not like it. The Mario movie. A movie that came out and I'm pretty sure was the highest grossing movie of this year. And a lot of people were praising it because it was quote unquote not what the critics liked. And a really fun time, and I hate to be that cynical butthole, but I didn't really like this movie. Which I know I'm gonna get the angry Nintendo boys coming at me. You're gonna have to get in line behind all the other fan bases that don't like me. Monsterverse, yeah. Marvel, yeah, it's animation's pretty, but it's just another Illumination movie. Like, I don't get why people were acting like this one was so special, acting like it was good. It wasn't. It was kind of bad. It has some like funny moments in it, and like Peaches is awesome, but the song, not the character. The character is fine. That's not terrible. It's just one of the most generic animated movies I've seen. It's really, I think it's heavily carried by all the nostalgia and the familiarity of the IP of Mario, but I didn't like the Mario movie. I'm gonna say it right now. I did not like it. D tier. You know what? You got a problem with it? Get in line behind everyone else. I guess let's do the other fan favorite movie that critics did not like, which made people mad, and that would be Five Nights at Freddy's. I'd be lying if I said I didn't see why critics didn't like Five Nights at Freddy's. It's not a particularly good movie. And this one is probably, strangely enough, this might be the most controversial one on this list. But Five Nights at Freddy's, I respect it more than I like it. I like the idea that it was faithful to the original franchise and that longtime fans of it could get behind it. There's definitely some fun elements to it. Like, I like that Matt Pat was in it, which, you know, so long, Matt Pat, you've contributed so much. You know, take that well-earned retirement and, you know, all the important, actual important stuff in life. And that, like, the one kill was kind of cool when Freddy chopped the one girl in half by eating her. But other than that, it's not good. Like, I get that it's a lot of, ooh, I know that from the game, ooh, I know that from the lore, but if we're talking about as an actual movie, it's not very good. The acting isn't really good. I'd say the only like consistently good actor is Matthew Lillard, and that's it, but he's in it so little. Josh Hutcherson, I don't care. He's okay in it, but everyone else, I watched this with a group of people, and, you know, call me the butthole for picking on the kid, but the child actor, she seems like a super nice, sweet little girl. And, you know, I hope the best for her. She seems like a genuinely, like, nice kid, but not the greatest actor. Not that, even for child actors, not particularly good. And I said that in the movie. And later, towards the end of the movie, one of the other people that I was with, he looks at me and says, you know, Cameron, you're right. She's not a very good actor. And, you know, granted, I'm the jaded, cynical asshole, so, you know, take it with a grain of salt. But The fact that it was advertised as a horror movie, and let's face it, a majority of the games are horror-related games. I know the lore isn't horror-related, but when you advertise it as a horror movie, and it comes from a horror game to the general people, and most importantly, when you advertise it as a horror movie, and it does quite the opposite effect of a horror movie, I literally have never felt less scared watching it. Like, it's actually fascinating to me that I watched this, movie that has scary scenes, and I literally come out of it feeling less scared, like, than I was starting the movie. Which that's not a good sign of a good movie, people. It's a boring movie. I'm gonna be honest. I know, I'm sure I'm gonna get a lot of hate for it. Again, I'm glad that it was a movie that the fans can like. And, the animatronics, I'll give it that. The animatronics are very impressive. And the sets all looked very impressive. It looked like a real, little Chuck E. Cheese knockoff place. And so, from a technical standpoint, it's a pretty impressive movie. And I get why people like it. If you like this movie, I'm not discrediting. It's not like if you liked Velma, I would have some concerns. Like, Five Nights at Freddy's, I can get why fans really liked it. I just didn't like it. It's, maybe it does a good job of explaining the lore. Does not mean it does a good job of being an actual movie. Invincible Season 2, Part 1. I'd say that's probably S tier. I would probably put it over Reacher and Prehistoric Planet Season 2. But it's an excellent show, and the first season was excellent. I have no doubt the second season is excellent. I have seen some people say that it's a bit slowly paced in this first part of Season 2, but I think that actually works to its benefit. I think it would be kind of frustrating to see it just rush through the important things that need time to be fully explored, like the characters' impacts that they've had from the realization that Omni-Man is a monster and what he actually comes from Viltrum. And so, it's not done, but Hazbin Hotel right now is doing the opposite. It's trying to get through so much all at once. And so Invincible Season 2, the fact that it took its time to let these characters breathe, to let them get settled from these traumatic events, is much more appreciated. And so I'm totally fine with that. Bad Guys Holiday Special. This is one that I watched with my family. I didn't want to watch. It's F tier. It was one of those. I suggested we watch something else. Everyone else wanted to watch that instead, and so is it worse than Velma? No. You're gonna hear me say that. Nothing is worse than Velma. Is it worse than The Mandalorian Season 3? Yeah. Mandalorian Season 3 probably would make me angrier just because of the corporate greed that just infects Disney products and franchises. But it's not the worst. But Bad Guys Holiday Special, the animation isn't good. The voice actors that they got to try to sound like the original cast aren't good. So there's nothing good to it. It probably had one decent laugh. I can't remember it, but I'm sure it probably had one. But it's like a little holiday short. It's pretty inoffensive. It's nothing to get too worked up about. Gran Turismo, a movie based on a true story about a guy who played video games driving, and then he learned how to drive a real race car and won a couple times. I mean, that's an oversimplification, but I thought it was pretty interesting. It was based off a true story. I didn't know this actually happened, and so I looked up the details, and for the most part, it seems like it was pretty faithful and true to what actually happened. There's definitely one scene that is over dramatized, and before I looked up what actually happened, I'm like, that just seems like that was added to the film for drama and stuff, which, it's fine, but it felt like such manufactured conflict for the story, so they could have this heavy moment and the inspiration of coming back that you just kind of saw it coming. You're like, oh, okay, that definitely was not part of the actual actual like story, but it's still but aside from that, it's an excellent movie. All the actors do a phenomenal job. Standout is David Harbour. He's incredibly likable as kind of this disgruntled ex-racer that now has to teach these kids essentially how to drive a real race car who have spent all their time playing video games. And he does a really good job of kind of conveying of like, hey, like this is like actually serious. You can't just joke about it. The cinematography is really good. It's a sports racing movie. I feel like you either kind of like these or you don't. But overall, I was pretty satisfied with it. I say this gets a big old fat top of the A tier. Asteroid City, why not? A Wes Anderson movie, which Wes Anderson, very acquired taste. Either you like him or you don't. I like Wes Anderson. I don't mind his style, but I get why people may not like his style and the way he does things. And from what I heard, this was probably one of his more divisive movies, even among his fans, with definitely seeming a bit overly relishing in the fact that it's a Wes Anderson movie. Like, this is, to what Tenet is for Christopher Nolan movies, this is that for Wes Anderson movies, I would say, where it's all these extreme elements, iconic elements of these directors with, for the good and for the bad. It's a bit slow in some areas, I will not lie, and it's definitely, I didn't know if, when I first watched it, I'm like, am I just an idiot? But I asked one of my friends who's a longtime Wes Anderson, and even he was definitely confused in some parts of the movie, which made me feel better and realize that it wasn't me, it was more the movie trying to be overly confusing. But it's a Wes Anderson movie. I really like the way he shoots his films, the way how each shot is perfectly symmetrical, how the characters look into the camera, and how he has all the characters act. There's some really funny moments in this, and so this one is a complete personal taste one. If people did not like it, I would not blame them, but that's A tier for me. I like Wes Anderson and his style. I was highly entertained for like 85% of the movie. And so with that, I think it deserves high A tier. Scott Pilgrim takes off. Another, man, I feel like every movie and show that came out this year just had a whole bunch of controversy. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is another retelling of the Scott Pilgrim story, except this one is much different, which, I'm gonna be honest, I was kinda glad. I know a lot of people said it was a bait and switch, which, to be fair, it is a bait and switch, but honestly, as someone who does not really like the character of Scott Pilgrim and feels like both, I have not read the book, to be fair, and I'd say the show is more based off the movie, but I really don't like Ramona and Scott as characters in the movie. I enjoy the movie. It's a very fun movie, and the way it's shot, Edgar Wright outdid himself, and it's definitely like an iconic of his style. But in terms of like actual likable characters, they're both extremely toxic, and I don't know, they're just not likable to me, and it's hard to root for characters that aren't likable. And from what I heard, they kind of did a better job than how it was in the book, which is kind of concerning to me. Whereas the show, I feel like, kind of addresses that, and so it actually, at least to me, makes these characters likable. I'm glad it just wasn't, it's just the movie, but animated. It's an actual different version, which, again, if you're gonna retell the same story, put a new spin on it. Even if you didn't like this show, you have to at least acknowledge and appreciate the fact that, hey, it's not a live-action Disney remake where it's just the exact same thing shot for shot, but in a different medium. This like actually does new things. It gives all the side characters, specifically the evil X's, actual personalities instead of just obstacles for Scott Pilgrim to overcome. They're actually people, and it's really cool to see their actual relationships with Ramona, and to see her repair some of those relationships and realize I think some of the toxicity that they had, but to be fair, also a significant amount of toxicity that she had as well, and then her actively apologizing to some of them for how she hurt them, which the way she hurt them was extremely bad, like terrible. You would be like, "Wow, you're a horrible person. Why would anyone like you?" And so with that, not to mention just beautiful, fluid, fun animation, and it's pretty funny too. But I like the conclusion that the show comes to and what they do with all of the characters. I was satisfied with everyone's arc and their interactions with each other. And I say this again as someone who's not read the book, so I can't say how every character's arc in the show compares to their arcs in the book, if they have them in the books. And so, but compared to the movie, I liked it more than the movie. And the movie's fun, but yeah, it's S tier. Not quite beating Blue-Eyed Samurai, but it's an excellent version of the show. And I think if you're salty that the guy that dates a minor, underage minor, is not the main character of the show and is not the exact same thing as you wanted in the first in the movie, then I gotta tell you, you're a little concerning to me. I think you should probably stay away from freshman high schoolers. But Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is an excellent show that I highly recommend. And unless you're gonna be a pissy little baby about it and cry about it, then I don't know. What, you gonna cry? Go watch a live Disney remake where it's just the exact same thing in a different medium. Let's do The Monkey King. A very generic animated movie that, the animation's pretty and, some of the fight scenes are fine, but that's it. I know it relates to the Monkey King story and Tales from the East. I don't know. I didn't care enough to research that for the Monkey King, so I'm just not gonna bother with it. But it's not really that good, but it's fine. Like, if you put it on for kids, it'd be fine. But if you're probably anyone over the age of 8, you probably could just find better things to watch. What's another generic one I can knock out? Where's Groot? Groot. I Am Groot Season 2. Another perfectly fine, average collection of Groot shorts that are kind of cute and don't really have much other than that. It's fine. You're not gonna get anything out of it, but it's not gonna kill you. I mean, at most it's like 15 minutes to watch it all, but there's nothing exceptional or special about it. Oh, Cocaine Bear. This was in my top 10 most anticipated movies. I wasn't expecting it to be good or anything. I just wanted it to be fun, show some carnage, show a bear on cocaine, eat some people, and you know what? That's what I got, so I'm okay with that. I think it could have had more of it in it, because I think it tried be a little too serious with the human characters, but other than that, it's fine. It's a perfectly fun movie that's just insane, but I don't feel as sane as it could have been. So yeah, honestly, probably top of C tier. Better than, I'd rather watch that than anything else on C tier. Solid spot in C tier. Perfectly fine movie. It's fun enough, and at least it's pretty short. Let's do some other documentaries. First up, we got Secrets of the Elephant. So this one, it's a little weird. Some people, you know, I include documentaries. I watch enough documentaries that at least the ones that I would like to talk about, I want to put on here. Secrets of the Elephant is one of those. Fun fact, elephants, my favorite animal of all time. And I actually got to meet some of the people who were involved in this documentary. It's an excellently made documentary that I had recommended to me from someone while I was off doing one of my internships, and you know, watching it, it was, as someone who's watched a lot of documentaries about elephants, this one had some like new stuff that I did not know, that I learned. And you know, I think that's something you always want out of a documentary, that if you want to learn about it. And Secrets of the Elephant does that. And so I think it's an excellent documentary that I highly recommend watching, with excellent cinematography, so much goodness to it. And so where would I put it? I put it S tier. Yeah, easily S tier for me. This is probably one of the best documentaries I've personally seen. And again, that's not from a lack of not watching documentaries. And so S tier, it'll fit snugly right in between Scott Pilgrim Takes Off and Invincible. But yeah, that is one that I think, given my recent experiences, which, you know, I guess plug for my social media, if you check out, you could kind of see what I'm talking about and stuff. But yeah, I think that's one that's, I think, given my recent experiences of what I've been able to have the opportunities to do, that's been a really good one. Predators, another animal-related documentary. It's just following predators. It's good. I wouldn't say it's like the greatest documentary out there, but it's pretty solid. The cinematography and the camera work is done really well, and I really like the different species that they focus on, and that each species gets its own dedicated episode. And so I put that one in solid B tier. Worth checking out if you're into documentaries. Rounding out, as far as I can see, the final documentary on here is Life on Our Planet, which was on my top 10 most anticipated list for this year. And I will say this one was probably the most disappointing out of all of them. The CGI is kind of rough in some spots, and despite being advertised as a prehistoric documentary, the majority of it takes place in modern day, which is fine, but you put in all your trailers, 90% of it is the prehistoric documentary content, which is what a lot of people really wanted to see from it. And so I don't think that, hey, if that's how your movie's advertised, I think it is fair for people to criticize how it was advertised. You know, that's one of my problems I have with Five Nights at Freddy's, in addition to it being a bad movie. But there's a couple good elements. Like, the CGI is very hit or miss. Sometimes it's really bad, other times it's exceptionally good. But even just the actual prehistoric segments themselves and the way the documentary is set up is just not in a very engaging way. It just feels kind of misleading and just very science heavy, and it's just pretty much always exclusively predator fights another predator, predator hunting prey, and mating. That's pretty much it. It's pretty much, you can pretty much just boil it down to hunting or mating. That's pretty much it. There's one segment in here with a Smilodon, and that's easily the best one, not the one with the terror birds. But if you've seen it, you know which one I'm talking about. The one with the Doedicurus, I believe, or Glyptodon, one of the two, the giant armadillos. That's probably the only segment in here where they have a segment where the animal feels like just an animal that isn't just, oh, I'm always hunting, or oh, I'm always looking to bang and reproduce and stuff. And so it has like one exceptional segment in it, and a bunch of pretty mediocre to not good. And so this one hurt, and it goes on for so long. But I'll put it above Monkey King, because granted, Monkey King was like your epitome of generic animated movie. But like, yeah, like when I put Five Nights at Freddy's above it, that's kind of really showing just how not good it is. Another dinosaur. Oh my gosh. Another dinosaur related project. 65, which with Adam Driver in the dinosaur movie. I did not go in this movie with very high expectations. I just wanted something simple. Just show me a survival movie, survival/horror movie, where it's people on a planet with dinosaurs and they gotta escape them. Just show me that. And do it in a fun, in a like creative way that keeps me engaged. Could not do that. One of the most boring movies of this year. A real contender for worst movie of the year. Again, still not as bad as Velma. We're talking about, we would have to talk about a special kind of breed to beat Velma in anything. However, I can at least say that 60, like there's nothing to 65. I mean nothing. I think the most is that Adam Driver is given a decent performance. The kid actress who plays the kid, I don't know her name. Oh, she's so annoying. I don't know why she's in so many projects, because she's not a good actress. And again, I get that she's a kid and I'm the butthole picking on the kid, but you know, I call him like I see him. And I'm sure there's people saying like, well, Cameron, if you're criticizing people, why aren't you doing it? Because one, I know my limits. I'm not gonna try to go and be like, no guys, I'm actually good at this thing and stuff. And I could say the same for everything. You could say, oh, well, you can't criticize people unless you do that same thing, which is utterly ridiculous. I don't think a lot of people who are watching are probably going to be politicians or other leaders of the world, or currently, maybe in the future, I don't know. Remember the little people, I guess, something like that. But I'm sure you probably got beef with at least one of them to some degree. And so, it's just not good. Like, the movie's not good. It's such a boring mess. And the fact that it's with dinosaurs, you wonder how. But then again, Jurassic World Dominion came out last year, and I will say that is much worse than 65. 65 is at least relatively short, and it's just bad, generic, and boring. Dominion is make you angry because you have no fundamental idea. And yeah, at the beginning of this year, 65 was slated to be my least favorite movie of the year. Until a little movie called Rebel Moon by Zack Snyder came out. Which, yeah, that one's going, wrong thing selected. Rebel Moon, oh my gosh. What an absolute terrible movie. I hated this movie so much. It really shows that Zack Snyder, and you know, bringing on old Zack Snyder stands. For a long time, I've been afraid to talk about Zack Snyder movies because the Zack Snyder fan base scares me, because no matter how much they insist, they always claim that this man is a filmmaking genius. And I bet a lot of them are eating their own words with Rebel Moon, because I've seen a lot of them online even saying that this is not a good movie. It is a movie that is overindulgent in itself. It's extremely bloated. It's it's almost 3 hours, and by gosh, does it feel like 10. You don't care about any of the characters. It is so boring. It's not very pretty, which at least Zack Snyder films usually have some kind of interesting camera work and stuff, but yeah, this has nothing to it. I'd say it's better than Velma, because again, Velma is just so mean-spirited, and it's a reboot of, and basically thinks that animation is just for kids, which is like 3 of my like pet peeves when it comes to movies and shows. And so at least it's not that, but man, in terms of like objective quality, like Velma's still worse, but Rebel Moon is pretty stinking close. If Velma is a 0, Rebel Moon's like a 1.5. Like, it's not good at all. And like that's a movie where I really question. And I've never been a fan of Zack Snyder. I try to give him a chance, but his movies always just reek of self-masturbation to yourself and just thinking, oh, look at my movie. It's such a great movie. I'm gonna indulge in everything. Cutting scenes that don't go anywhere, never heard of them. There's a whole segment where we toured the farmland, and it goes on about 15 minutes, way too long. And I say, well, this is where we grow these crops, and you know, this is where we bring it in and harvest it in. Maybe it wasn't 15 minutes, but if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of scenes in here that just drag, and you think, okay, this is okay if maybe it was like in a book or something, but in a movie, you gotta condense stuff. You gotta know when to cut stuff up. I mean, even when I make videos, there's stuff that sometimes you want to hit that certain runtime, but at least I can recognize, hey, it's either not a funny joke, or this point doesn't really make sense, or I don't explain it properly. And at least I know when to cut things out. And that's the problem with old Mr. Snyder, which, you know, like I feel bad for him. The guy's been through a lot, but you know, it doesn't change that he doesn't make good movies. Sorry. Actually, that's not true. He's made one good movie. Legend of the Guardians of Gahul. That's the only good movie he's made, which maybe that'll be a video. Wouldn't that be a fun thumbnail? The only good movie Zack Snyder has made. Oh gosh, I can see the Zack Snyder hate now. I'm gonna be honest, that's probably gonna be coming down in the future. Kong Skull Island, the Netflix anime. It's just, I didn't like it. Like the two, I don't remember any of the characters' names. I remember the one girl being extremely annoying and just got on my nerves. I'd say the only redeeming fact is Kong, but even then he's not really in the show. And I feel like they make all these monsters that just aren't really that creative. It's like, oh, a meat-eating plant. Never seen that before. Oh, a giant crocodile. Never seen that before. Oh, a giant bug. Never seen that before. There's not really a whole lot to it. I feel like they have a lot of access to like all these creatures that they could use from the Monsterverse. Like, you see a skull crawler once. You're like, we couldn't have gotten more of those? Like, I don't know, that would be more interesting than just muscle croc, which I guess it's kind of, I will say the belly flop scene's pretty funny. But yeah, it's not really that good. Kong is, I'm conflicted because they make Kong a lot more emotional, and it seems very off. Like, Kong has always been able to show emotion, but like not to the extent where he's like fighting back tears and stuff. I don't know, it felt kind of wrong. It's like seeing Kong almost cry is kind of like it's almost like seeing your dad cry, or like a parent cry when you're a kid. You're like, whoa, like that's not supposed to happen. What's going on here? But it's okay. It's just kind of drags and is boring. And I will say, if the one girl with her dog, which, oh yeah, that's a really cool idea, a giant dog, never seen that before. There's just not really a whole lot, and I'm kind of confused with how season 2 is set up. I don't really want to watch season 2. I probably end up will, but yeah, it's not good, I'll tell you that. D tier, just because for the most part the animation's pretty solid, and like when you get some like actual fight scenes, like, they're actually a lot of fun. But yeah, there's not really a whole lot. Maybe there wasn't. It's like, as I do it, I think, okay, and we're back. I was able to, the program I'm using for this tier list, because I don't want to download Twitter and make my own tier list on there, crashed on me, so I had to bring everything back. But, yeah, Kong Skull Island, just not a lot to it. It honestly could probably be in C tier, but I just didn't enjoy it. It's just, the main girl is just obnoxious. And when you have a character that's obnoxious, that really makes me look down on the rest of the project. Bad Batch Season 2. Oh. AK, it should be called Bad Batch, the show that is completely composed of filler. I'll give it at least this. It's slightly less than the Mandalorian, but not by a whole lot. I'll give it this. The animation is like your standard, like, higher Clone Wars quality, which is good. And you know, there's a couple fun references. I like that they brought back the Zillo Beast. That was fun. But other than that, it's just the exact same stuff. There's a really funny video where it's just every Bad Batch episode ever. And it's this guy just doing a pretty crude impression of all the characters. And that's better. You could watch that and you would get the same effect of season 2. But I'll probably watch season 3. Not really going to care that much. Agent Elvis. This is a show, I will be the first to say, not particularly good. But I had a lot of fun watching it and would gladly watch it again. Granted, I'm a sucker for Elvis, so I do like me some Elvis music, but the action's a lot of fun. It's gory. There are, like, a decent number of jokes that actually work to, like, justify its existence. And so at least it has that, but it does have a lot of tropes of, like, your standard adult animated comedies where it's like, oh, if we say swear word, that equals joke, right? I feel like for the most, like, it definitely doesn't do it as much as, say, a lot of other shows like Hoops and a lot of the other Netflix animated adult shows, so at least it's better than that. But to say it's good, no, not really. But I personally like it. But again, that's something where if a lot of people did not like it, would not be surprised. I personally had a blast watching it, but that's just me. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the only MCU project that I saw this year, and pretty much the last one that I have said on multiple times that after that, I'm done with the MCU, and I'm at least true to my word. I literally have not watched any of the other Marvel movies. I could not care less about them. I couldn't even get myself to care, even if my life depended on it. That's how strongly indifferent I feel about it. Guardians of the Galaxy 3, it's good. It's good. So, you know, put your pitchforks down, angry MCU fans. Is it great? Is it on the same level as the first two Guardians? No. And I know a lot of people are a lot of Marvel fans are probably already commenting, telling me to kill myself or delete myself for the YouTube censor. But it's good. The emotional moments are very, very solid. Like they're probably some of the best in the franchise, both for the Guardians, which is saying something because the Guardians have always had very hard-hitting emotional moments, and even for the larger MCU. So I think the moments that are like good are really good. The cinematography is pretty good. Like James Gunn is a pretty competent director. Like even this was on my top 10 most anticipated movies for this year, or for 2023, I guess. And I wanted it to be good. And it was realistically about as good as how I was kind of imagining it. But the music's solid. The characters are good. I will say one of the things I didn't really like is just Gamora. I don't know. It felt very weird to include her when we have Gamora, but she's a different Gamora. And I get that, she never met Quill, and so she's not going to be the same person, but I feel like that Gamora, if you look at her, even how she was like with Nebula in Endgame, that's way different from like how she was in this movie. Like, you can't look at me and say, oh yeah, if Quill didn't meet her, she would have turned out like just like this jaded, violent butthole that just gets mad at everyone for people who criticize her. And so it's just, I don't know. I don't really believe that like that's how far of an extreme she would go. And so like, not that she's meant to be likable, but like she doesn't really do anything. She's just kind of there, and she's really just a prop for Peter to come to basically learn the lesson that the High Evolutionary did not, and that's you don't want to perfect things. You just don't like things as they are. And like obviously they have Peter learn that, but I feel like there's other ways you could have had Peter learn that lesson, and Gamora didn't necessarily need to be there, because if you didn't make Peter go through that arc, there's no story specific reason why she needed to be there. You couldn't have just been another random Ravager that gets them in. I will say, not as bad as some other MCU movies. And to be fair, James Gunn has done this with some of his other with the other Guardians movies. Some inappropriate comedic moments during emotional moments. It's again not as bad. I feel like most of the time they're allowed a little more room to breathe, but it's still not great, and it definitely kind of holds it back. And so from what I've talked about, it makes it sound like I absolutely hate this movie. I think it's CD. That's not true. I guess one more thing to add that'll probably make people think that is, I just didn't think it was a very funny movie. I don't know about me, but I saw this movie once in a packed theater. I got the occasional chuckle from people, and then I watched it with a group of friends, and even then it was the occasional chuckle. But for the most part, like, I was kind of shocked how unfunny, or at least how a lot of the jokes did not land with me, which, I don't know, it just felt weird. It felt, there was definitely, like, a lot of the elements of the movie felt like they were really trying to force comedy, and they just didn't strike with me. And so, but I think like why you would probably watch this movie, like the real reason why, is you want to see the conclusion for the characters, for the Guardians, because we've fell in love with these characters, and you want to see the emotional moments. And I think the emotional moments of this movie heavily carry the rest of the weaknesses. And so, like, again, like, probably the stuff that's actually important in a movie, Guardians 3, I would say, gets right. And so, because of that, I can't say it's, like, a terrible movie, or even, like, an okay movie. I do think it's good. I will put it at high B tier. Like, that's how I feel about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. High B tier, which I know. People are gonna hate me for that one regardless, but people act like B tier is not a good tier. That's a good movie. Or that's a good tier in my opinion, but everyone's like, so what's an okay movie? 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 that's over halfway. I've gone on that rant before. I won't. I'll spare you all. Let's keep up the controversy. Let's do Barbie. That's a fun one. A movie that was way different than what it was advertised, and I kind of get why, because I have a feeling if they advertised it how the movie was actually going to play out, probably would not have made $1 billion like it did. And people felt very strongly about this movie. People say it's either the greatest movie ever, It's empowering, it's thought-provoking, and a lot of people say it's the worst movie ever. It's woke, it's trash, it's hates men. I know this will turn both sides on me, but I think it's I'm kind of towards the middle. I think it's fine. I think it's good. I think there's some really strong elements in the movie, and I think there's some really weak elements in the movie. And I gotta say, for the most part, I think it works. But here's the thing about the movie. I will say the monologue in this movie felt very, I don't want to say woe is me, but it felt very like, that's probably the only time that I kind of got the hate men vibe, and I would not say that for the movie, but it's basically one of the characters, so I haven't seen it, one of the characters goes on this monologue / rant about all the challenges that women have, and basically the way it's portrayed makes it sound like men have no problems, we're all peachy, we're all dandy, which could not be further from the truth. I mean, guys unalive themselves at a much higher rate, so clearly some struggles are being had, but other than that, I think for the most part this movie struggles with, ironically, one of the things that was said in that monologue, basically saying how you have to be one thing, but then you also have to be the complete opposite of the other thing. So for example, I believe she says, oh, you have to be friendly because otherwise then you're seen as a bitch, but if you're too friendly, then you're seen as deserving unwanted like sexual harassment, and I'm paraphrasing there. Ironically enough, I think this movie is trying to be both thought-provoking and like trying to push the borders and like make people uncomfortable, but on the same hand, I don't think it fully commits to that, because the messaging and themes of this movie I think are a little confusing, and I've seen a lot of people debate and argue what the true message of the movie, which, you know, movies art, they're subjective, anyone can get any message out of a movie, but I feel like this is one of those movies where it's trying to have a pretty defined message that, you know, you take away and say, wow, I really like the message this movie gave. And I see a lot of people debating what it is, and to me that's kind of the sign of a not great message, of not great execution on how you want to tell the message, because there's a lot of different ones. If I had to pick one, I'd probably say that, you know, what the movie's trying to go for is that patriarchy is bad for both men and women, or that if you look, but, you know, even then, that's debatable. You could also argue that that one sex is not superior to the other. Because if you look at it, Barbie is kind of portrayed as a villain in the beginning of the movie. I mean, you look at the Kens, and how they're basically homeless, that they're not basically allowed, they're basically treated like, kind of like, you know, for lack of a better word, boy toys, for the Barbies. Just, oh, okay, hi Ken, and then just kind of, okay, go away now. And so, and like, to the movie's credit, they call out, you know, I say Barbie like there isn't 500 Barbies in this movie, specifically Margot Robbie's Barbie, since she is kind of seen as the mainline Barbie of that world. And to be fair, the movie does kind of call her out on that. She does actually apologize to Ken and to the Kens, that, you know, how the Barbies treated the Kens, that's not right. And you know, it kind of, to be fair, I think it does show that the way both of them were running their worlds, neither is a perfect world. It's kind of one of those, we have to come together. But even then, the way they do it at the end, it's kind of just goes, oh, go back to granted, we don't get to see a whole lot afterwards, but it's just kind of, the Kens are like, oh, can we have a compromise on this? And the Barbies are like, no, but we'll give you one thing. And the Kens are like, oh, okay. And you're like, well, that seems a little kind of contrary to what you were just trying to teach and build up. And so I think the movie does suffer from a confused messaging, because like even then, or it's trying to throw, it's either confused or it's trying to throw too many messages, with evidently some of them conflicting with one another just because of the nature of the message. But even then, like, there's like the ending. I'm gonna be honest, I got a little teary-eyed. Did not cry though. I don't cry. I have not cried in over 2 years, which, you know, maybe that might contribute to mental health problems, but, you know, who cares? It's fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. But the ending, like, almost kind of the message I got from out of the whole movie is that the struggles that we all experience, it's not necessarily defined to men or women. It's not only men suffer, only men have these very specific problems, or only men have problems, or only women have problems. The way I saw it is, to be human is to experience the trials of life, but in the end, you still get the beauty that is living life. Which I'll say, if you want a movie that I say like fully commits to that idea, watch The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. That is a highly underrated movie, and that one I think really, like, I mean, granted, that's like the main message it's going for. And I think with Barbie, I think because of just, you know, let's face it, it's mostly girls that are playing with Barbie dolls, and so I think because of that, I think this movie was always going to have more, address more of the issues that women face versus men. And, you know, I think that's important. I think we need to have movies that address both. And while Barbie is heavily more addressing the female issues that women often face, I do appreciate they still do kind of address some that men do. I just think that it could have done better for like how they were trying to play it at the end of the movie, because it felt very different from kind of what they were building up to. And so with all that, where does Barbie go? Where does Barbie go? Everyone wants to know where Barbie goes. I put it in B tier. I think it is good. I think on a technical level, the sets are very impressive. It's very well shot. All the acting's very good, minus the one chick who's in 65, because again, not a good actress, sorry. But I enjoyed Barbie, despite its flaws. But, you know, I know me putting it right in the middle, that's gonna be the one that it's gonna be the outrage, because trust me, I've talked with people about Barbie and my opinions on it, and, you know, no matter what, I'm always wrong because I don't have the extreme views of movies. And so, you know, sue me. Old Dads. This was a Netflix comedy by Bill Burr. It's a fine movie. At least it's funny. At least for me. I like Bill Burr's comedy. This is a very heavily Bill Burr movie, and so either if you don't like Bill Burr as a comedian, you're probably not gonna like the movie. If you do, I think you will. I will say this is basically just kind of like a movie version of F is for Family, which is a Netflix show with him, which is an animated adult comedy, which definitely has some of the pitfalls of common adult animated comedies that we see too often. But for the most part, I think it does a pretty good job of how they handle things in that. But old Dads, it's fun. It's funny. There's not really much to it, and so I'll put it in B tier right behind Barbie because it's funny. Like, it's a comedy. Comedies, if they make you laugh, then, you know, it's a solid movie, because let's be honest, it's mostly the comedy aspect. And if it's not funny, then, you know, it failed to do its job. Which, speaking of failed comedies, no hard feelings. Another movie riddled with controversy for very fair reasons, with a couple hiring Jennifer Lawrence, who is 30, in her 30s, I don't remember. The age gap is significant, and they're basically paying her to basically sleep with their son because he's introverted. And you're like, oh, it's funny because it's a hot woman and it was like an 18-year-old, and you're like, okay. And then you have that creepy double standard of, What if it was a parent paying like a 30-year-old guy, like a 33-year-old guy to sleep with their 18-year-old daughter heading off to college? It kind of falls apart, and it's just, there's like a couple decent jokes, but throughout all of it, it just is kind of has that creepy, just uneasy tone, like undertone, and it just makes you feel uncomfortable throughout all of it. And so it's going in D tier. Like, the only thing holding it is that like it's got a couple of okay jokes, and I won't say that's the two other things that I liked about it, because that would paint me as some kind of creep, which we all know is not true. But yeah, it's just that I don't know, you always have that unsettled creepiness, which the resolution they do at the end I think works, and again, I think the resolution helps it keep it from F tier. But it's just the whole initial part, and like the majority of it is just kind of creepy, especially like if you were to do, like, I don't know, it's just that double standard where it's like, well, if you were to do it the other way, this would be like just as creepy. But then like society would see it. Oh, society, you said the word, would be like, oh, okay, why is this movie getting made? We're coming down on towards the end, so let's do Across the Spider-Verse. This was a very, very highly anticipated movie after the success of Into the Spider-Verse. I dare to say it's bigger, it's bigger, it has a lot more ambition, and it ends on a very big cliffhanger. And I'll say this, I liked this movie more than Into the Spider-Verse, but objectively, there's a lot of plot holes to it. Granted, some of it could be fixed later on, but there's enough issues in it where you're like, well, that's kind of a lot of story issues to it. And it's hard because this is essentially just a part 1 movie, so it's hard to fully judge it. So maybe part 2 could fix a lot of issues, but yeah, it's just enough issues where this was a top contender for number 1 movie of the year. But I did not end, but 2 other movies came along, or 1 other movie came along, for me to put that, but it is a great movie. The soundtrack is amazing, animation is absolutely beautiful, the characters are all great. But I feel like it's kind of hard to place this one until we get beyond the Spider-Verse, the part 2 of this story, because there's a lot of I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and say loose ends, and say that they're gonna address certain things or plot holes relating to it, and so we'll kind of see how it plays out. But for now, at least on the list, highest movie of the year. I would don't think I would put this over the Blue Samurai. I think the Blue Samurai is. Here's the thing with movies and TV shows, I'm actually not so sure about that. It's hard because with TV shows, they usually have a lot more screen time to flesh out the story and characters, whereas a movie does not. This might be one of the hardest decisions of where I'm putting Across Spider-Verse. It's evidently S tier, without a doubt, definitely above most of S tier. However, just lacking that, or it makes it a lot harder where if it's actually gonna be higher or below Blue-Eyed Samurai. I think I gotta give it to Blue-Eyed Samurai. I'll give it to Across the Spider-Verse, and here's why. I think with movies, when you have a great movie, I think it's harder than to make a great show. Because you do usually have more time. Granted, with stories, with shows, you have to tackle bigger stories. But I think with movies, you have that much more limited time. I'll keep it as is. I think just because Across Spider-Verse is part 1, and so I don't fully know how it's gonna be. So part 2, if part 2, I think, wraps up a lot of the stuff that part 1 sets up, or maybe addresses some plot holes and stuff within Across the Spider-Verse, I think then it could be Blue-Eyed Samurai. But I think for now, because it is a part 1, I think that is kind of holding it back because we don't fully know. Let us do Gamera Rebirth, another Kaiju Netflix anime that came out this year. Kaiju fans were eating good. Starting off very strong in the season, ending kind of weak. I'm gonna be honest. It's certainly better than Kong Skull Island, but I was kind of getting a little bored. I will say the action for it is pretty solid, but I feel like each action scene, granted that kind of is based on how Gamera is affected throughout the movie, I think, or the show, but the action starts off like exceptional, like really violent. I love it. And then it just, I don't know, it feels a little underwhelming for the finale. Which, like, I get it. Gamera's tired. He's been taking a beating, but I think it's C tier. Certainly above Bad Batch and I Am Groot. But I would probably prefer. I'd probably prefer Monarch. Gamera just has some. The kids aren't the worst, but sometimes they really get on my skin, or they just feel like you're stereotypical. Oh, kids in TV shows are not always done great, and so. Cannot say I loved it in that sense, but it's an okay show, and like the music is like really well done. Just for me, it didn't like hit all those points, if you catch my drift. I realize I kind of saved like most of the really good stuff for the end of the video. Oh well, yeah, let's do Last of Us. Full disclosure, never have played the game, never had any interest in the game. The game doesn't look super appealing to me, at least for the games I like to play, and so I never played it. So I don't know how it compares to the story. I can say as a show, very well done. The only thing is, some of the episodes seem very fillery, and I think that kind of hurts the relationship between Joel and Ellie. Again, I don't know how to compare it to the game, but at least from what I saw, well, the one episode with a flashback with Ellie definitely dragged on too long. I don't think we needed a full, like, 48 minutes dedicated to that episode. And it's not like the actual story that was being told there was good. It's not like with, I'm trying to think of their names. I'm not good with names. It's been a long year. The Nick Offerman and his lover, the two gay fellas, like that you could argue was a bit fillery, but that was like actually really good. Whereas I feel Ellie's story is just kind of meh. I don't care a whole lot, and so it just feels like it just drags on, and I feel like that 45-minute or the 40-minute episode could have been cut down in half, and like 20 minutes more could have been devoted to Joel and Ellie. I didn't feel like that like real strong connection that from what I hear the game is so famous for, and at least for me it didn't feel like it was like one or two like scenes away from me from being like, oh yes, I believe their relationship with each other. But I mean, it's a beautiful show. It takes itself very seriously. I love how they do everything. Everything else, like that thing that I said, is more of a minor nitpick than anything. And so I'll put The Last of Us Part 2 up in A tier, top of A tier. It felt good to have a show that could still have fun, but it mostly takes itself seriously. And I think that definitely helped it. And it was certainly after Velma. This was the second thing I watched that came out this year. Much needed relief, breath of fresh air. But definitely one of, if not the best video game adaptation. Well, after the obvious. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Another addition to the Mission Impossible franchise. With it having a lot of the good staples of Fallout, while unfortunately having some kind of just plot holes or moments in the story that make you think, well, that seems a bit strange, but I mean, it's a fun movie, and I guess this was my #1 most anticipated movie of the year. And when I first watched it, a little underwhelmed. I did watch it a second time, and it was definitely, I think, better that second viewing. Super intense. It's just, I can't help but compare it to Fallout, which Fallout is, in my opinion, one of the best action movies ever made, and is one of my personal favorites. Whereas Dead Reckoning definitely had some noticeable flaws, some chinks in the armor, which they're doing one more of these, and that's the final one. I believe that one is scheduled for 2025. And so we'll see how that one plays out, but it's still an incredibly fun movie. It's got all the like great elements of Fallout, with just some unfortunate added plot holes or leaps in the story, or leaps of logic in the story. But like, other than that, like it's an S tier movie. It's at the back of the pack. The worst of the best, I guess, is probably the best way. The worst of the best is the best way to put it. Let's do Nimona. Nimona was honestly a movie that I was not expecting to be as good as it was. Watching it, and the themes that it tackles and the animation, it was, and honestly, an excellent animated movie. I really liked what they did with it. It's just a very, I don't want to say wholesome, but I like the edge that it has to it. And just the way it handles things. Only thing that kind of annoyed me in it, now it is an S tier movie, which some people are probably going to get upset by that for 2 reasons that I can think of, and what happens at the end of the movie. But it's fine, it's whatever. I don't really care if you get mad at me. I don't care anymore. But there's a scene where they basically expose that one of these people is one of the characters is lying. And I'm keeping it vague, just if you are interested in seeing it. But they keep it vague just so that way, if you're interested in seeing it. But they expose a character who's been lying, and they expose the lie, and they could have just shown one of the other main characters the lie, and that this character tried killing a version, like what she thought was him, and that would have instantly like dismantled his trust. And if they had done that, they wouldn't have had like the breakup scene and stuff. But then you couldn't have the emotional resolution with the big giant monster and stuff. But other than like that minor thing, which if that were to be fixed, would kind of fix certain elements of the story. It's still like a fun, incredibly fun, touching movie that I would highly recommend. Transformers: Rise of the Beast, the sequel to Bumblebee that's just kind of okay. I mean, it's fun, but I don't know, it just kind of some cringy moments in it, and I just feel kind of dumb. And at least like some of the moments you think, well, that probably should have been in the other Transform movies, like those human characters. I don't know, it's just kind of cringe, just kind of awkward in some spots. It's fun though, but again, it's just kind of a mid movie, nothing too much to it. Flash. The one with the grooming pedophile, Ezra Miller. I'll say, when I started this movie, I hated it. It was extremely annoying. Because you have two Ezra Millers who, let's be fair, is not a very good actor. And now you have two of them, and they make one of them extremely obnoxious. Doesn't help that the CGI also not very good. And I know the director said that was intentional, which that's mind-boggling. But yeah, Flash, in that respect, not very good. You just don't care about a lot of it. I will say, like, the last little bit is kind of fun. That's probably the only good part of it, but even then, it's not that good. The problem is it's just a Flashpoint movie, but you could just watch the animated one, and that one is easily much better. Plus, like, with all, I don't know, just Ezra Miller in real life is just kind of a creep, and so it just feels kind of weird putting that one high. But other than that, it's just not really that good of a movie. And I watched it for free, and I kind of wish I got my money back for it. But at least, like, it has like a kind of element of fun to it at the end. So at least I can say it has that. And that's pretty much it to it. Yes. Next, Oppenheimer. I was shocked how blown away I was by Oppenheimer. And to be fair, Oppenheimer is not a movie for everyone. It's a very long movie. That being said, I loved Oppenheimer. It's one of those movies that to me shows like excellent filmmaking from a filmmaking standpoint, and how, you know, let's face it, I feel like it's a lot harder to make a movie about a real guy who was doing math, movie about that just as interesting as a movie with people with spider powers or a samurai that goes around and fights people. I think when you make a inherently harder topic to make it more entertaining, making it as entertaining or as engaging as it is, and even just from a technical level, just the amazing aspects of it and the sound, like, oh my goodness, the soundtrack. I know a lot of people give grief for Christopher Nolan for his abundantly loud soundtracks, and this one's no different, but I think it's very fitting for how this movie wants to play itself, and I didn't have a problem with it. I was fully engaged with all of it. I don't know, I feel like it's a hard movie to kind of explain unless you've seen it and you also feel similarly about it. There's probably going to be a lot of people that are like, I saw it, it was boring, I didn't care. Only part I liked was Florence Pugh's boobs and stuff, which, you know, to be fair, I couldn't blame you for it. But Oppenheimer to me is one of those special films that, let's face it, it's gonna probably win a bunch of Oscars this year. And you know, I'm fine with that. I think it's one of those exceptional movies that reminds you, oh yeah, this is like really good filmmaking. No, I'm not saying it's the best movie ever or anything. It's just a movie that struck personally with me in terms of the filmmaking aspect of it, and all the actors do a phenomenal job. Robert Downey Jr., probably the best actor. If he doesn't get an Oscar for a supporting role, I'd be shocked. Cillian Murphy, also excellent job. There's not a single bad performance in the movie. Extremely star-studded cast too. There's some big old names in there, but I just love. There's so much about Oppenheimer that I love, and it's hard because I probably will never do like a full in-depth review for this movie. But I don't know, maybe like a scene on like one element of it, of why I like it. But Oppenheimer was such a great movie to me, and I loved it. And that's why Oppenheimer is going at the top of the pack of S tier. And you know, it was an excellent movie. And you know, between movies of this year, it really came down to Spider-Verse and Oppenheimer. However, there was Oppenheimer would have been top dog of the year. That being said, something equally relevant, strangely enough, to Oppenheimer, and I dare say bigger, ended up coming along, and you know the story. Godzilla minus one. This is one of those movies that you hear the hype for it, and at least for me, I've learned to temper my expectations when it comes to movies and hype. I think it's very easy for people to get sucked up and carried away with the hype train, and to overplay a movie on how good it is, and similarly overplay how bad a movie may be. Godzilla minus one is one of those ones I can happily say just how it fully met the expectations that people were saying, and I dare even say even more so. Unlike Oppenheimer, where the movie does drag in a little bit of parts, where I was fully engaged, but even me with, I'd say, a relatively good attentive span, was starting to kind of notice, okay, I get why this scene's in here, it's important, but it drags. Godzilla minus one, off the top of my head, I can't think of any problems with it. I mean, the CGI is amazing. Like Godzilla's design and how he's portrayed, all the human characters are amazing. This is probably one of the few Godzilla movies where you actually give a crap about all the characters, and you actually care. Which, let's face it, giant monster movies not super well renowned for their really deep and interesting characters. But Godzilla minus one, I mean, the scenes with the people, to me, are just as interesting as the scenes with Godzilla. The cinematography, absolutely amazing. And the fact that this was made on a budget of $15 million, all which, I don't know how well the actual VFX people were treated, if they were given, proper wages and, not ludicrous hours. So that could definitely be part of the reason why it was actually, I think the director actually said it was even cheaper than $15 million. But even Godzilla himself, this is the first time where Godzilla is legitimately terrifying. This is straight up a horror movie, in my opinion. Way better than Five Nights at Freddy's. It's not a horror movie. Well, that's kind of how it plays off, and that's how it was heavily advertised. But Godzilla minus one, that's a terrifying movie. Like my heart was pounding. It was intense. You're genuinely terrified of Godzilla, which is kind of how it should be. Even a good Godzilla, the idea of such a creature existing should be terrifying. And so it was so satisfying to see not only an excellent movie being made, but an excellent representation of Godzilla as a Godzilla fan. That's something that's a better comparison for Five Nights at Freddy's. You have Godzilla minus one, which also has a very niche fan base with a lot of heavy lore with it compared to Five Nights at Freddy's. I dare more so. Granted, he's been around a lot longer than Freddy Fazbear, but Godzilla minus one. I mean, what a great movie. I can't wait till I can see it again. This one's definitely one that I'm watching a lot, and I kind of wanted to downplay my reaction to it in its own separate review that I got, because after I saw Godzilla minus one, I knew this was going to be the top project of the year. I mean, everything else in S tier is great, but Godzilla minus one, I think, had so many hurdles and was able to accomplish so much with, obviously I'm an American, but the fact that this movie has made almost $100 million as of recording this, for a foreign film, is incredible. It's the highest grossing Godzilla film, and it's starting to creep up on the ranks in highest grossing Japanese films. But even just foreign films, it's one of the highest grossing films of all time, which is impressive. Because this movie did not do a lot of advertising. This is a movie that has become popular strictly by word of mouth. Whereas everything else on the list of S tier are coming from either major directors or major studios, or they're major IPs, or they're being pushed by major studios and stuff. Whereas Godzilla Minus One, Toho is not gonna be as big as Universal or Paramount or Warner Bros. Or Netflix or Sony. Godzilla Minus One has a lot of obstacles to overcome in that sense, and the fact that it's doing so well, that even people who don't really care about Godzilla are singing its praises. The soundtrack, also amazing, beautiful music, and just really captures the power and emotion of each scene, depending on what the scene is. And I dare say Godzilla Minus One is a near perfect film. And like, I genuinely mean that. I can't think of anything. This is, in a way, this is a movie that I've always wanted. An excellent Godzilla movie that is also just objectively an excellent movie. And with that comes the conclusion of ranking all the projects that I saw for 2023. And I'd say compared to other years, the S tier has it has the most movies, or I guess, entries in there. And, to be fair, there was a lot of schlock that I did watch, schlock and trash. But to be fair, I also chose to ignore a lot of the trash, like I mentioned earlier. And I think that's kind of something that, I think should honestly be encouraged more. I don't think you always have, like, even if it's a movie you like, if it's not getting good reviews, or like, even just like, if you see a movie and you don't think it's gonna be good, why watch it? Why waste your time? Time is so valuable. There's so much in this world that I think that it's worth so much more doing that. Why waste your time on a 2.5 hour movie when you could go and go and live life? Ironically enough, I kind of like to leave on basically kind of what I took away from Barbie of all movies, but and even Godzilla Minus One, but that life is valuable. And what I've had the opportunity to do, it was very eye-opening in that regard, and really showed just how fragile life is, and how quickly time can get away from us, and how we cannot, and before we know it, we don't have any left. And so with that, I want to thank you all for watching this video, making it to the end, watching this channel. I hope you all have a great day. Stay safe out there. Go make the most out of life. Spank all those buttons, and I will see you all later. Bye-bye.